second annual Food Justice Film Festival presented by the Center for Biological Diversity. Today, we're going to talk about the film, The Ants and the Grasshopper, co-directed by Raj Patel, who joins us here today, along with Anita Shetaya and Esther Lupaffia, who are both featured in the film. Raj Patel is a filmmaker, scholar, and author. He's professor at the University of Texas and has co-taught courses on food at Berkeley with Michael Pollan, testified about the global food crisis to governments in the US, the UK, and the European Union. Raj has also been recognized with the James Beard Foundation Award, a prolific writer. You may have read his pieces frequently in The Guardian, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and so on. And he's written several books, including Stuffed and Starved, The Hidden Battle for the World Food System, and his acclaimed latest book, co-authored, is entitled Inflamed, Medicine and the Anatomy of Injustice. We're also honored to be joined by Anita Shetaya, whose story is featured in today's film. Anita is a farmer and a local leader in Malawi. She works with a local organization called Soils, Food, and Healthy Communities, which helps implement climate solutions to local food production, like clay stoves that we see in the film, that use less wood, and sharing recipes to make use of new crops. On her farm, she focuses on soil health and intercropping to help retain the soil and maximize yield from the parched earth. Anita is also passionately outspoken leader on gender equity and sharing labor fairly so that men share a daily workload usually shouldered by women. Esther Lupaffia is also from Malawi, and she's featured in the film. She's a doctor and co-founder of Soils, Food, and Healthy Communities, helping to build food security and community nutrition. Esther also works for gender equity, especially in agroecology. She has previously worked as HIV/AIDS coordinator and holds a master's degree in social development and health, and she will also be helping us translate. Dr. Rachel Besner-Kerr does research for the Soils, Food, and Healthy Communities Initiative, and she also researches topics ranging from seed access to AIDS-affected agriculture to agricultural history. She is based in Cornell University and has terminal degrees in development sociology, soil science, and international development. We are truly honored, I mean that genuinely, to have these speakers with us today. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us, and apologies for the technical problems, but we'll get to the bottom of them as we muddle through today.
We're here now, and I'm so grateful. Raj, I want to ask you first about the idea that places like the US are the most innovative and strong when it comes to our agriculture and food. You feature Anita and also the Soils, Food, and Healthy Community organizers. And the film is this beautiful visual narration of the incredible resilience and determination of the human spirit and the impact of climate change on food and vice versa. How is it actually people of color in the global South, in your view, frontline communities that are making the most sustainable food systems and progress addressing the environment and hunger?
Well, I mean, one of the big ideas in the film is that frontline communities, no matter where they are experts in one way or another. Professors of their own poverty is one way in which one of the movements that I've worked with in the South has talked about this. So the idea that, I mean, it's not surprising that movements in the global South have a long history of engaging with the state, with international development organizations, and organizing in resistance to the imposition of neoliberal policies, but also fighting back for things like biodiversity and for dignity and autonomy. So groups like La Via Campesina, the International Peasant Group, were ones from which I've been learning for a while. And I was also just lucky enough to go to graduate school with Rachel, who co-founded Soils, Food and Healthy Communities with Esther. And when we were both living in Southern Africa, we got the chance to sort of exchange ideas. And in the end, the work that Rachel and Esther were doing was so powerful that I felt that, I'm privileged enough to be able to see lots of different movements taking on big ag and fighting for a better food system. But the stories that were coming out of Soils, Food and Healthy Community were so immediate and so underreported because of all this white savior nonsense that happens around the development industry, that I felt that one way I might be of service would be in working with soils, food and healthy communities to perhaps tell some of the stories that hadn't been more widely available.
Yeah, and there's a moment in the film where an Iowa woman farmer says the men are excited to be the #1 in soybeans here in the United States, but the women are hoping for small organic farming. And another farmer talks about killing grasshoppers, spray, 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 and pray, and comparing agribusiness with this large monocrop farm to Anita's 1-acre farm. Is this an important difference for us to consider in solutions moving forward and approaches to say sustainable food systems, the size as well as what we grow and so forth, small organic farming versus large monocrops?
I'm happy to answer that we have experts here. My short answer is yes, but I would defer to Rachel, Esther, and Anita because they've put the work in.
Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, I'll jump in here because I think there is an enormous difference. I think smallholder farmers are often not given enough credit for being able to support biodiversity and food security. But I have recently served on a UN panel of experts that wrote a report on the potential for agroecology to address not only food security and nutrition internationally, but also to address biodiversity. And there have been a lot of studies coming out in the last decade demonstrating how having these more diverse farming systems have so many benefits in terms of soil, water, air, and human health and well-being. So I think that we haven't given enough attention to how we farm and the implications of how we farm, not only for local communities, but also for the environment.
Thank you. I think Linda is going to ask Anita a question.
Good morning, Anita. It's so nice to have you here. I have a question for you. We learned so much in the film, and thanks to the filmmakers, you and Esther were able to fly all the way from Malawi to America. And your story is just inspiring and amazing. And I wanted to know what inspired you so much to come to the US and help American farmers and policymakers.
Icho chikatipangisa chomene chikachakuti kuno ise takhwasika chomene na nkhani ya climate change. Kweni ivyo vikupangisa ni vimajosi vya kupambana so vinandi vikusangika vimafaktari vikulu wali zindege nguvanyitu kwene kuko kuwalo kuno ya indege tikuchulukira kataiona sono karboni yitu iri kunangika chomene iri kunangika chifukwa cha majosi vya kupambana kufuma kumafaktari so chika cha kukondwesa kuti tikavaendere uthenga uvanyitu tikavakhalire.
Anita says, what inspired Amos to go to America was the issue of climate change. She thinks, and she's still thinking, that climate change is mainly caused by the people who have got large factories, who use a lot of machinery, and who have a lot of large planes and so many planes which cause a lot of carbon, and that causes a lot of problems with the climate. That's why there is climate change. And then she says, going to talk with the farmers in America was to say she should learn from them what they are doing and see if what they are doing is really good for human health, or if it is good that it doesn't spoil the climate. But what she learned was the means which they use are not the best means as compared to the means how we farm here, that we use hose, we don't use machinery. At the same time, she says what she was saying there, she thinks the farmers from there are going to learn from what she was saying, and then maybe people in her village and people in Malawi or in Africa are going to have good lives if people change.
Thank you so much. And I have another question. What message do you have for people in the US who, don't want to change? For the people who don't want to make any changes, who think everything's fine, or what do you say to them?
Vati pa vantu ava ku America vakumba kusintha cha imwe mkuwana nambu mungavaphalirachi kuti vasinthe.
Vantu icho ine nkuyanayanira ngakuti uthenga uwu ngevanyithu vangachipulika kuti vasinthe chifukwa kusintha kwa nyengo uku nawo nyengo iliyonse kungavasanga kweni vachipulikenge icho tavanyawo usuzgo iyi yatikhwaska nawonso na machero usuzgo iyi ngavakhwaska.
She says the message she has is whatever is said in the film, which she was talking about, people should take it and people should learn from what she was saying. And she should take it that it is not just a joke, but it's serious, that people in her village and people in Africa are suffering with the climate change. Sometimes there is drought, sometimes there is floods, so people are suffering. So she's saying this drought, this climate change will also affect them so much in the future if they don't change. So the message is, let people take it serious that the climate change is real, people should change. And I think I can add on that one to say, I think with this film, I think the message was very clear that we're talking about climate change and that people like Anita were complaining of climate change. Not only Anita, including myself as someone working with the smallholder farmers and also being a Malawian who is suffering with the climate change because we all eat the same type of food. And then that what we were saying in this film, it was not just a matter of enjoying in America, seeing planes and so many beautiful things, but we were giving the message that our friends, farmers, and everyone else should change, that maybe one day we can have a better world again, that people can grow food the way they want, with having enough rain without drought and the like. And the messages, some people who were talking with in America, some were accepting the messages, some were saying, yes, yeah, it is true to say there is climate change, but many were saying, you think there is climate change or you whatever. So the other best thing is to say, we were advocating to say it's better if people would also come to Africa and see the reality of life, how it is here. But now the pandemic comes in, which really gives restriction for people to travel. But it would be better, those farmers, 1 or 2, 3 or 4, could come and see how difficult it is with the climate change in Africa.
Right, absolutely. When you came to America, Anita, and Esther as well, what was your favorite experience or your most memorable experience?
Vati abamukiza mkaruta kwa America, ichi chikamukondwesa nicho mene chikachiku.
Ku America icho chikanikondwesa chomene tikati tafika ngaona kuti kuno kwithu nakula kuli mphambano chifukwa vanyithu kula nkhuni zinandi, majinga nandi, palipose pandu pali green, nyumba ziwemiso, vyose hivyo ine kuno zikanikondwesa chomene.
Anita was interested because people have plenty of water, something which is very scarce in a village or in many parts of Africa. And people have beautiful houses. People everywhere, it was green. While here, it is green sometimes it is very dry. And also she saw a lot of beautiful things. And a lot of firewood. While cooking here is a problem, people use firewood. In the villages, there is no electricity. So she admired the firewood because she's liking that one. Also, she says she admired plenty of food, any type of food you wanted to eat. you can eat. The food which she cannot easily find, she was eating in America.
And what about you, Esther?
I think there were a lot of interesting things. The fact I've gone to many countries, I have stayed in Edinburgh, so I already knew that people have good food, good houses, and so many other things. But the only thing which I was interested with was the farmers. To go to the farms, seeing how farmers are farming, and I thought it was very easy the way they do it. And that here we have seasons when we have tomato and we have onions, but there it was, they have greenhouses, they have every time, they have food in their gardens. So I was really interested with farmers. I thought maybe people in America, you wouldn't find farmers who are working very hard in the gardens. We found them. But one thing which struck me was the fact that there are also people in America who are suffering in their fields with many other problems like us. So that one really, I thought it was something which I should see, and we were discussing with Anita quite often when we were the two of us, discussing of what things are there, which Anita never thought can be there, but they were there.
Right. Anita, when you were here and you were speaking with the farmers, what did you think is their biggest obstacle to change? Because we know that some of them, don't really want to accept climate change. But what else did you see that is a big obstacle for them, to get to a point where they can change and where they can be better farmers and just better for the environment?
Vatichi mukaona kuti valimi vakula vangasintha chakuvachitiska nchivichi.
Icho ngaona kuti valimi vakula vangasintha chachika chakuti vanyitu vakulimira matractor. Apo ise kuno tikulimira maoko. Kukolola sonako vanyitu vakukololera so matractor. Apo kuno tikukololera maoko. Sono vintu hivyo kuti visindike vangasintha chakuti panyina vayambe kulimira maoko vangasintha cha. Kweniso vakachipulikisika chakuti climate change iliko. Vakapulikisika cha ndipo vachali vanyake mumanya vakupulikisika cha. Kweni iliko climate change.
She says their obstacle is because they are very rich. One, they use machinery. They can't use hose like us. Even when harvesting, they use machinery. So for them, they can't reduce themselves from high to down to low, to use a hoe, to use hands for harvesting. And again, the other obstacle is, she says, they haven't accepted that there is climate change because they have all those things. And yeah, that's all what Anita.
At one point in the film, we heard, while the rich are debating what to do, poor people have to endure. And when the elephants fight, the grass suffers. So, Anita, what do you want people in the US to know to get them to take climate change seriously and become better activists for change?
Vati mukhumba kuti vantu vamanye uli, vachite uli vaku America. Pakuti mukuti para nkharamu zikutimbana, kutheka ndiwo kupwetekeka. So vachite uli kuti vachipulikisike chinthu cha kukhwasikana na climate change na kusintha kwa nyika.
Yeah, ine chungukhumba vantu vala ngeti vasinthe kusintha kwake mwakuti mafactories vavengera kuchepesako. Vachepeske ngeko. Ndipo vamanye kuti sikuno tavantu tikusuzika. Tikusuzika nadi na nkani ya climate change. Apo kula vanyitu vakunjoya chikuwa chili chose chino chili makora waka mumalo mwake.
Yeah, she says the thing is, for them, what they need to do is to understand that climate change is real. And it should start from the government. If it starts from the government, to put it that everyone should know that the climate change is real, then those people are going to change. But if it, like we went to the farmers and many other places where we went, if someone doesn't share this film with the top government people, including from me now, including the president, then people cannot change. But if from top, everybody hears it, they can easily put it in policy to say, there is climate change, let us change. And Anita says, what she saw was, whether it's a farmer, whether was heard about climate change or not, but people are enjoying. So they cannot change because they enjoy.
And I want to ask an extra question too. Anita, how's everything going in Malawi? Like, are there any new changes that you've made, or what's going on there right now with farming and with your farm and with everybody there?
Vati imwe ivi mwasinthisa ko imwe ni viji ivi mukuona kuti vasinthanadi ni viji.
Uno icho chasintha chomene ntchito tikugwirira limodzi dada na mama, mbewu nazo tikupandanga zakasazikasazika, malisipi takhala tasambizikana pafupi waliyonse waphwazikika. Vinthu ivi tikuchita tonse dada na mama, mnyamata na msungwana uwo.
Anita says there's a lot of gender equity now. Men and women are working together in their gardens, and also they are doing intercropping, and so that they are using some drought resistant crops, and some, so that if one crop fails, the other crop does well. They decide together, a husband and a wife, what they want to plant and what they want to eat, how much they should give and how much they should sell. And also, they cook together, they do recipe demonstrations where them as promoters and FRT members, farmer research team members, they go to the community, teach farmers how to cook different types of food from the crops which they have grown. And these crops are the crops which they grow, which sometimes if there is a dry spell, they do very well, they also do it. So all the crops. So decision making they are doing together. She says they go to the communities, they teach each other very well. This is what she has done.
That's wonderful. Anita, what gives you hope for the future?
Vati mnthazi mkumba vitu vizakaveuti.
Munthazi tikumba kuti vinthu vizakasinthe, nja uyi dongo lithu likhazikike liwe dongo la kusinthika, tive na chakudya chinandi, umoyo uwe uwemi, ndipo tifume mukachimenti Elia tiluteso uthenga uwu luteso kuyanyithu vanyake awo vandakhazikike na visambizo ichi.
So she says she's visioning to have a future with the healthy people, good soil fertility, good nutrition for adults and the children, food security for everyone in Malawi, and everyone using agroecology, and climate change go away, life should be normal, and everyone should be enjoying. That's nice.
That sounds good to me. Raj, I wanted to ask you, how did your experiences in Malawi change you or your view on, all of this, food systems, climate change, everything?
Well, I mean, I think for me, the journey was really about recognizing how much power there is in storytelling and how much of that is undeserved. Often part of the reason of making this film was that there's a kind of structure of food documentaries and stories about nature that you see on TV where you have suffering people of color, and then an expert who comes in and says, oh yes, have you heard about agroecology? It's very exciting. And then you have more suffering people, and then at the end you have one small farm, and people just sort of beavering away, and by the sweat of their brow the children are running around happily, and there's some jangly guitar music, and you're lulled into the sense that everything's going to be fine. And we made this documentary to try and correct that vision. But what we discovered along the way was that even sort of well-meaning middle-class folk are bearers of power in a way that needs to be held accountable. And I've learned so much of this from the way that Rachel, as an academic, has democratized her academic practice. And the right thing to do was for us to get out of the way and let Anita and Esther drive the sort of direction of the film. And so that's why we spent a long time working with Anita and Esther, working with Esther in particular working with Anita in particular to craft the narrative and the voiceover. And that's not, just recognizing how one could be complicit in relations of power and storytelling, and recognizing that there are ways of decolonizing filmmaking. And this, we went a small way in this film to recognizing that and to engaging in a certain kind of decolonizing filmmaking activity, because there aren't too many films that will stick with Tumbuka and recognize that it is perfectly and entirely right and possible for Anita to be the narrator. But more than that, I think along the way we were able to work with other movements in the US for them to be able to tell their own story, and that there will be other films coming out in which our role as middle-class filmmakers was just to raise money and then walk away. And so that's certainly something that was exciting to be a part of, and it was humbling. But most humbling of all was just the opportunity to learn from SFHC and all the activists there. I mean, we lucked in to working with Anita, but there are so many amazing people who we didn't have time to fit on the screen, but whose journey was an education certainly for us in the film crew.
Now, Raj, just following up on that, in the film features people that might be recognizable to food justice activists, seed savers and people in the urban gardening movement and so on. And it's a really stark contrast to some of the other farmers in the film as well. And I hope that you have projects maybe following up on that, but I also have followed you for a long time as an author, and your works talk about decolonizing medicine, the connection between healing our bodies and healing the planet. And I was wondering if you could just talk about the connection here between, and in the United States, decolonizing the food movement and decolonizing medicine and healing our bodies and healing the planet. It's a similar theme that you continue to work on. And I wondered if you could just elaborate a little bit on that theme.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. I mean, there's a line that's in the film that Anita says, which is that when you go to your neighbor with your problem, they can't ignore you. And what that's about is relationality. What the work that Rachel and Esther are doing is about, expanding and understanding the relationships that people have in the home and between one another and through the web of life, the various plants and biota in the fields. What's super exciting about SFHC is how it understands that the life in the soil is part of the life of the community, and the life of food is about a life of connection and sharing. And colonization is about sundering that life, right? It's about putting the food over here and the medicine over here and the expertise over there. And the peasants, they're in English, peasants as a synonym for ignorant. And it takes work to make those separations. And the work that Rupa Marya and I have done in our work on bodily inflammation is just a way of recognizing the kinds of things that SFHC has been doing for 20 years, that it's possible to heal the burning climate only by healing our relationships with one another and with the rest of the web of life. And the good news is it is possible to do that. It is possible to recognize how power works to separate us, how power works to create hierarchies that are deeply inegalitarian, and to understand the decolonizing project as one of seeing how we ourselves have been colonized. But it's not just therapy, it's about the action of moving towards a different world. And when I see, for example, Winston, I can't claim to be free of patriarchy, and to see Winston's journey from one end of being utterly patriarchal to being much less is a journey that's a lifetime of struggle for all of us. For anyone who has been the beneficiary of patriarchy, we'll be doing this for the rest of our lives. And what decolonization is about, and what SFHC offers, is an idea that that's not a burden, it's a practice of liberation. And to practice liberation every day for the rest of your life is a gift. And I'm so grateful to have received it from Rachel and from Esther and from Anita and all the activists in SFHC and my comrades in the movements for decolonization here, and for the work that y'all are doing too. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for opening that space of continuing to evolve. So none of us are perfect at the moment, but let's talk about SFHC. Rachel, why don't you tell us a little bit about what is soil, food, and healthy communities, and Esther as well, of course.
Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks for that opportunity. SFHC, Soils, Food, and Healthy Communities, a mouthful. It really started as a pilot project that Esther and I dreamed up after we had interviewed over 50 families whose kids had been admitted to the hospital for severe malnutrition. And in the interviews, we heard stories of families not being able to afford synthetic fertilizer because the fertilizer subsidy had been removed, and relying mainly on corn as their crop, which needed some sort of fertilizer, and not knowing of alternatives, organic alternatives. So that knowledge had really been lost, that they had used in the past. So we had lack of diversity, reliance on synthetic, chemical fertilizer. But we also heard these really wrenching stories of men spending a lot of money, not a lot, if they had any money from harvest, spending it on alcohol. And if women tried to speak out about needing that money for food, there was domestic violence. So we had this very lethal concoction of lack of knowledge about organic alternatives, and gender inequality, and reliance on a few crops that were very, needing a lot of fertility. And so we came up with this small pilot project that we wanted to test, but we wanted farmers to test themselves, farmers to try different options instead of relying on commercial fertilizer, but also being attentive to these questions of gender inequality and child nutrition from the start. And it was a pilot project out of the hospital. Esther at the time was the director of the maternal and child nutrition unit at the hospital. And so we met with village leaders and invited them to participate, and 7 villages stepped forward. And farmers who were in those villages were invited to carry out very small experiments on a 10 by 10 meter plot to test different options of their choosing. They could pick from a range of different, really simple options of growing different legumes to improve soil fertility, but that were edible as well. And so that's where it started. That was 21 years ago. So it started as a pilot project, and it grew into its own farmer-led organization. And maybe I'll hand it to Esther to talk about what SFHC is now, because that's where it began.
Thank you.
Yeah, now SFHC is, at that time it was in the hospital, like Rachel is saying, and then from 2017, July, SFHC became registered as a trustee, and it is a farmer-led organization. And then the farmers really themselves are the ones who are forming the General Assembly. We have a few people who are on the board who are advisors, technical people, but really it's farmer-led. And it started in 7 villages, like Rachel is saying, those days, with 30 farmers. And those farmers became the first farmer research team members. And the farmer research team members were trained. The first year, yes, they were all seeing the different legumes and cereals which they intercropped, but they really didn't know how beneficial it was going to be. But the second year, people really started seeing the changes, that the intercropping of maize and the pigeon pea, maize, soya beans, maize and the groundnuts became beneficial. And looking at the main idea of saying they would want to improve food security, soil fertility, and good nutrition, that has come up. And now I can say over the years, the 21 years Rachel is talking about, but reaching now, we are saying we are working with the over 10,000 farmers in 458 villages with a lot of farmer research team members. Apart from improving nutrition, soil, and food security in the northern part of Malawi, Mzimba district, we also improved the same in the central region of Malawi in the district. This has come up because we collaborate with the different institutions. We collaborate with the Minister of Agriculture, who are working hand in hand with us. We collaborate with the University of Malawi, Chancellor College, working in the district. We are collaborating with the Rwanda, University of Malawi, Agriculture, and so many other institutions that we are collaborating in Malawi. But we have also our collaborators in University of Cornell, where Rachel Bisneger is coming from, University of Western Ontario. Now we have with the Farms for Biodiversity, University of where in German, the pronunciation is very difficult, but and so many other universities in America and Canada we have collaborated. And we are well known. If you go to our website, we are well known as SFHC, and many people learn from us. Now, where we are sitting with Anita, we are at the Farmer Research and Training Center, which is in our hands with the farmers. Yeah, Anita, yes. These are the in charges, and we have big space. Now the hostels are being constructed. Very shortly, we'll be training a lot of farmers and agriculture people. Like we are saying, next week we are already having training our curriculum to agriculture extension workers and so many other farmers who we are going to work with shortly. So there is a lot of development which SFHC has done. The people we rely on are the promoters, like Anita. They are 19 in number. These promoters were the first farmers, and they are now working to help other farmers in the communities. And we have the farmer research team members who, when there is a pandemic of COVID-19, we are not supposed to go there. We are not allowed to go to the community. These people, because they are based in their own villages, they are the ones who are teaching people, carrying the messages from us through phones, and then They tell us also the messages from there because we can't go to their villages, but they are doing tremendous work that everything is going on very well. As the farmer research, soils, food and healthy communities.
Yeah, and I just want to add in, it's not just about agriculture, the work of SFHC. A big part of what we've worked on, and Esther has really been at the forefront as well as Anita, is trying to make changes in terms of gender inequity. That's been a real focus of our work. And a lot of the ideas for how to do that have come from the farmer research team and have come from community members. So one of the things that I think we see a little bit of in the film is these recipe days. And this was an idea that came from farmers in Malawi as a way to encourage men to cook, but not having a lecture about it, but really having a joyful event to share recipes and involve men in the cooking. So a lot of our ideas around changing gender relations are slow going conversations, one-on-one conversations, use of theater, recipe days, and that's been a really exciting component of our work. So it's not just the agriculture is really core because these are in farming communities, but it's also about gender and about child nutrition, and that's something we think is really important to our work.
Yeah, and we also involve a lot of youth when we are saying gender equity. When you are training people about gender, you have to use methods which will interest people. So methods like using songs, dramas, you do whistle stopping, use the PA system, which the youth enjoy, and they create very good messages concerning gender and everything else. So when people come to see the dancing and all that, they get the messages from the songs and from the dramas. And in that way, all the messages about gender equity gets spread all over. As we are talking now, Anita is here, but everyone else is in the community because there's a recipe day in new areas where they are training people. And everybody enjoys the dancing, eating, cooking, different things. And you can see at first what she's talking, what Rachel is saying, that there was a lot of domestic violence and the like. All that has changed because the gender training. So the gender training has really transformed a lot of things. And people, decision making now is for both, including Anita. Domestic violence, it's not one of the things. One thing which I should say, when I was talking about agriculture, I always assume that when we talk about agroecology, everybody knows that gender equity is part of that. But sometimes we forget that some people, they may not know that as SFHC, Soils, Food and Healthy Communities, we have combined these things, gender equity and agroecology.
And your website is soilandfood.org. What can people do to support your work, Esther?
Yeah, the first thing which they can do is to listen to this film, watch this film several times and get the messages which are being said there. If they get those messages, they will help to spread about what SFHC wants, about what Anita and people from Baba and Malawians wants, because they know if we fight climate change, it means life will be easier for everyone. We made very good listening farmers in America, but they cannot do it only them. The ones who are part of this film, they plus everyone else who is going to watch, change, listen and change. And maybe one thing which we can say is, why don't you share this film to Joe Biden and the vice president? If they see it, they will see, oh, there are other people who came to America who are complaining about climate change. So that is what we want. Yeah, that's what we want.
Thank you. I'm sure, Raj, we would love to show President Biden your film, and I hope that happens as well. What else can we do to get the message out and help your storytelling?
Vachiteuli kuti muviri. Kuti vakuAmerica vachiteuli.
Apa chichikhumbika ngauti filimu iyi ikuyenera kufikira paliponse. Sopala yafikira paliponse ndikuti munthu aliyonse wakhasitenge.
Vavapereka. Says the film should go to everyone, like I said, and people should see. And then people should say, with what Anita was saying, people will know what the other needs people need from that village and many people in Africa.
I think as a final question, we're just going to ask each of you to share something that gives you hope. But a lot of these issues are very painful and slow moving. And so what is something that gives you hope?
Vati ichi chikuti chitiska vinthu zikuenda pachoko pachoko. Chikuti chitiska kuti tikanane kuti zinthu zidzasintha njani. Yoyanga. Njani chimene chimakulimbikitsana kuti zinthu zidzasintha.
Icho chikutilimbikitsa kuti vinthu ivi visinthenge mara yakuti uthenga utupereka na kusambizgana kuti kusambizgana mulimi na mulimi munyake vinthu vira vikukhazikika vikutipanga mazgolo pachoko pachoko
kuti anthu akulimbikira. She says, although the change is very slow, but still the fact that people work very hard in their gardens, and they know that, like you are saying now, you are interviewing us, you are listening to what we are saying. Anita says you'll be spreading the message, and the climate change will change, people will change. But here, people change because they listen to the messages which we tell each other, and people work hard. So with the rains which come, people plant drought resistance crops, or when there is floods, they try to use methods which can hold the water that the crops are not washed away. So those are the hopes which
Raj and Rachel, do you have any hope for the future to keep us going?
I mean, I have hope in that I've seen working in Malawi tremendous change in a context where it's extremely difficult, very few resources, and people are willing to experiment, they're willing to take risks, and they're willing to try to make a difference. To me, that gives me a lot of hope, because I've also seen the changes that have happened in people's homes and communities. And so it's given me a lot of energy to keep working. I've been working on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report for impacts, vulnerabilities, and adaptation over the last 3 years. And that is at the global picture, it's very frightening, but I guess what does give me hope is both the scientists working on that report with me. There's 250 of us who are working on it as volunteers. So that's hopeful from around the world. And people in the United States and Canada, where I live, the people are concerned, and there's rising awareness and interest. So that gives me hope. It's much more in the public eye. It's much more, there's a lot more interest and willingness to hear that this is an issue we all need to be attentive to, and we need to change. So I think that all of that gives me hope.
Thank you.
And I mean, I just want to double down on that. I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation, that it's possible for us to be thinking about food and climate as bound together, and that we can have reasonable discussions now about things like the Green New Deal, or a people's Green New Deal, the red, black, and green New Deal here. And, I mean, I think that's a real transition, a real shift, that 5 years ago, it was pie in the sky. And now we're moving slowly, and I live in Texas. I'm not in a position to peddle false hope, but I do think that there is reason for us to think that together we can, in time, do the right thing. And that's all thanks to the work that everyone here, I think, is doing in terms of actually, boots on the ground, changing people's minds, and also showing people how we can live in a better way. I mean, that's the great gift of SFHC, is not merely that things are bad, but that things can and can demonstrably be better. And what a gift that is. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I want to thank all you speakers today: Raj Patel, Anita Shataya, Esther Lupaffia, Dr. Besner-Kerr, for coming to us all around the world. Thank you for all the work that you do. I hope the audience will view the film, The Ants and the Grasshopper. You can find more information at rajpatel.org, antsandgrasshopper.org, soilandfood.org, and I hope you'll consider funding these efforts if you're able to. And so from California to Texas to New York to Malawi, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for being here as well. And it has been an honor to speak with you. Thank you so much.